like new ceiling. It's quieter here, isn't it? Just need it resting.
Call the meeting to order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
On the wrong side.
Oh, they did move that. Thank you for noticing. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join us for a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, we're going to start off with citizen concerns, round one. Any citizen to be heard for anything that is not already on the agenda? Come right on up, sir.
John Malloy, IT. I just want to give a shout out to County Building Services Director Kenny Schmitz for the ceiling tile up here. It's first step towards the AVI project that will come to fruition at some date. But you have an excellent Building Services Director, and he deserves kudos for that. So anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else to be heard? Anything that is not on the agenda? All right. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Do we want to make one amendment still there?
Yes, delete item number 10A.
So we're going to omit 10A and then move the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to the consent agenda, items 3 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes of the June 7th, 2022 meeting. Item 4 is approval of claims. Item 5A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. And 5B is approval of retiree request for spouse to remain on county health insurance. Item 6 from County Auditor is A, receive the appointment of Chad White to fill the Lawton Bronson Community School District, Board Member District 1. And 6B is approved cigarette permit for HCI Heritage Express Company in Sloan, Iowa. I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item 7, canvassing of the primary election.
Steve Hoffmeyer with the Auditor's Office. I've got the canvas here for the primary election, along with the abstract of votes for you guys to receive and to get your signatures on. We had 10 provisional ballots for the election, of which 3 were rejected because they didn't have the proper ID. 7 of them were accepted. We had 1 Uokava ballot that came in, and that was accepted. That was a military ballot that ran through. And then we had 1 other absentee ballot that came in and was rejected because it was too late. Had to be in by 8 p.m. on election night, so.
All right. So nothing changed from the official count with the 3.
With the additional ones, no.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
So motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8, discussion on proposed carbon project, Heartland Greenway. Come on up.
Thank you. Good. All right. Elizabeth Burns Thompson here on behalf of Heartland Greenway and the developer Navigator. We do have a couple economic handouts that we'll hand out to board members as well. I think our goal with this is to provide kind of a project update, where we've been, where we're at, and what we look to in terms of moving ahead. Additionally, we've brought a number of members of the team from different subject matter expertise scoping areas of sorts. So we've got Steve Lee, our head of engineering, Ann Welshans, our head of excuse me, Ann, it's been a long day. She does all of our right-of-way and leads our land teams as well. And then Brandy over there in the corner that's doing a lot of our environmental and permitting work as well. So wanted to make sure that that team was available for questions. But what we'd like to do is be able to, like I said, provide a little bit of framework of about the project beyond what we did with the iUtilities Board in December and January with those initial rounds of informational meetings, and then really open it up for questions from you as the board. If you've got specifics as it relates to, be it engineering, our land program, our outreach thus far, and what we look to do moving forward. Like I said, we've got those experts here to be able to field those technical questions. So what I'd like to kind of preemptively say is we've taken those very first steps in permitting. With that, it's very well stipulated here in the state with the Utilities Board. That first process being those informational meetings. We held about 36 of them over the course of the state of Iowa. We replicated that process in the neighboring states. They don't necessarily have the exact same format, but we thought it was important to share information about the project kind of consistently and in the era of transparency. So we had those meetings, like I said, throughout December and January, very structured in terms of what that encompasses. Following those meetings then throughout, kind of kicking off in February and moving up until now and forward looking of that as well. Many of our teams have been doing survey work. So those that have seen the map, specifically, the map of our proposed footprint here in Woodbury County would note that we've identified about a half-mile corridor for initial observation. What we've been looking to do as part of that is begin to winnow that corridor down from a half mile to what we think is maybe the optimum placement for that easement, that 50 feet that would be necessary for placement of the pipe. So feedback is a critical part of that process, so interactions with landowners thus far, community leaders and individuals like yourself, coupled with the technical components that come into play as it relates to that survey work, be it constructability surveys that Steve and his team have completed, be it the biological environmental surveys, as well as the cultural resource surveys that Brandy's team is working on also right now, helps to provide guidance as part of that additionally. So that work has been taking place kind of in that interim. Another key kind of component, we haven't done any easement work thus far, so we haven't done outreach to landowners in terms of talking about valuations associated with what those easements could look like. We'll kick off that outreach, I believe, the middle part of July, and can speak to specifically about what the teams will compose of, the training that will go into those onboarding of those land agents to make sure that we're holding those individuals to a very high code of conduct and ethics. We want to make sure that folks are treated fairly and that there's a negotiation that everyone can feel welcome and it's a fair process. We took a lot of the feedback that we got during those informational meetings, incorporated into that easement offer, as well as the build out of the easement contract itself. So we think that as folks see that language, see the dollars and cents associated with those offers, they'll hopefully see some of the things reflected that they had asked for as part of those meetings. We still are on schedule based on the initial outline that we had identified as part of those meetings, such that we look to file that permit application with the Utilities Board here in Iowa the latter part of this year. So think early winter, very late fall. Additionally, some of the permits that are necessary in some of the other states as well, there's a number of layers of permits, a laundry list of sorts at all different levels. So from the county level to the state, as well as a number of federal permits from sequestration as well as the pipeline itself. All of that culminating such that we don't look to kick off construction until probably 2024, such that we'd phase in those facilities into an operational stage throughout the latter part of that year and into 2025. Again, for those that maybe weren't part of the informational meetings that we had, as a background, we are building out a very robust, or proposing to build out a very robust carbon management platform. In total, about 1,300 miles across 5 states here in the Corn Belt, with a good chunk of that here in the state of Iowa. But when you look at the processors that we're partnering with, predominantly ethanol and fertilizer plants, it kind of makes sense why a lot of that would be here in the state of Iowa. We are home to a lot of those industries. I think that provides a pretty kind of brief snapshot of project timeline, where we've gotten thus far. I really think that the biggest value would be, providing opportunities for dialogue. And I'd ask kind of my team members to maybe move up to the front here so that as we've got questions, however you want to run that process, I'll defer to you. But we do have kind of experts from every different facet of the project available.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. How many landowners in Woodbury County would be affected potentially? Do you have a rough number on what that is?
Do you have the landowner numbers available, Ann?
And to your point, just in clarifying, none of those landowners have been approached up until this point, is that correct?
Correct. And so at this point, there may not be like a definitive answer to that just yet. Like I said, we start with the half-mile corridor, and part of winnowing that down is not only the technical feedback that we get from the surveys that are done, but also feedback from landowners. So that we have what we think is maybe an optimal route. Part of the negotiation process is also determining, where that needs to continue to ebb and flow, so that there may not be a definitive number specifically. I'm trying not to dance around the answer to your question. It's not a set in stone number just yet. 153 is an approximate, so about 150, yes.
And if those landowners don't voluntarily enter into an agreement, the route would be to go through some sort of petition for eminent domain to be able to be justifiable in terms of connecting. I know that's not preferable, I get it, but is that the ultimate? As
an absolute last step of last resort, there are processes in place that we can navigate associated with condemnation. We have a very strong track record, and I think the team can speak to that if you'd like background to kind of attest to that. I think also, condemnation eminent domain is not an efficient process. It's not a cost-effective process, and frankly, it's not a good way to showcase collaboration. And at the end of the day, that's what we want out of this project. We want something that works for us. We want something that works for the partners, the businesses that we're partnering with as part of these projects, as well as landowners, right? Something that at the end of the day, all of us are proud of, and that means being collaborative through the routing process as well. And that's also, why we've built out a very kind of robust timeline associated with the project too, so that we have the time to work through that with landowners and explain the why, what, and the how before you get into terrible many details about it. But yes, we want to be able to ebb and flow where possible. The other caveat of that being, we have identified that half-mile notice corridor per the IUB stipulations. If we need to go outside of that, we start back at kind of step one again, and we'd have to go and do another informational meeting of sorts. We've done a lot of due diligence to identify that broad half-mile corridor from all of the publicly available data at this point, that's really, looking at following existing utility infrastructure that's in place, right? The safest place to put new infrastructure is generally right next to existing infrastructure, on top of minimizing collective impacts of proximity to communities, population centers, and all of that. So we think we've identified that by identifying, that half mile. Within that, obviously distilling it down even further to make sure you're getting something that's workable.
And last question, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So if of the 153, let's just say that you were able to collaboratively work in cooperation and in a good spirit of dialogue with 150 of them, 3 of them were not amenable, and you had to go the other route, which I know nobody wants to go through that. Are those 3 in this instance or example compensated or not?
Yes, everyone is compensated regardless of whether it goes through a voluntary process or not. Things that would move through condemnation would go through a compensation commission at the county level.
Okay.
But again, I want to echo for the board, for everyone in the room, that is absolutely a tool or tactic of last resort.
Thank you.
They compensated at market value if it goes to
Well,
that?
That's
have a
via the
commission.
compensation commission, so that would be something that I believe is done at the county level. You have,
So how do you hold hearings when we can't get anyone to volunteer for the commission to assess damages? That's my follow-up question.
so you say you don't have a compensation commission
We
identified
have
in the
one,
county?
we have one person that's willing to volunteer and nobody else has signed up, so I don't know how, the DOT is
Ongoing, ever chronic
problem.
issue.
The DOT can't hold any condemnation hearings because we don't have a commission. So we're kind of in a rough spot. And I think part of the reason we can't get anyone to volunteer is because they don't want to see it, certain things happen. So, we have one person that's a rural landowner that is on our commission to assess damages, and that's it.
So also as a local volunteer, I've seen it firsthand, the struggles to get folks to step up and volunteer for different things. But I do think it would be very inappropriate for the company to get involved in any way, shape, or form
No,
in terms
I'm
of the
not
county
asking-
level.
no, I'm
But
not
I have an
asking you to-
appreciation of that lack of volunteerism of sorts, but yes.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, it's 153 landowners just for the sectional pipe in Woodbury County, or is that statewide?
We have 153 parcels, of that probably right at 110 landowners. So some of the landowners own what we would call.
So when we have you guys answer, can you come to the microphone? Because it's on YouTube and everything, so.
We've identified 153 what we call parcels. And within that 153, we're probably right at about 110 specific landowners that may own one or more parcels.
And do you guys have kind of a general map on yours? I know the last group did on theirs. Is that available to throw on the screen or receive or anything?
We have it on the screen here.
So the other thing I'd note is the county maps. We put these out available on the website. So if you want to look up not only the Woodbury County map, if you want to look up the maps across Nebraska, Illinois, anywhere, we put those up before we went on the road in December and January to make sure that folks had access to that information. So I guess if we wanted to pull up the company website, we could certainly pull it up right off of that as well. We absolutely do value transparency.
That might be good to receive and put up on the county website. I don't know if that's a thing, Mr. Auditor, that we could do, but
Is that something you could email to the auditor for the minutes?
And those would have been part of the packet of information that was mailed to all landowners within that half-mile corridor when we did that initial meeting back in December.
So I will move to receive that map.
second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Yeah.
The only other thing I'd like to be sure we take the opportunity to at least address in some detail is there's a lot of conversation and questions in relation to safety, design, and kind of the engineering going behind this. So if we do have some time, I would love to have Steve talk through a little bit of, in relation to the safety components, what we're planning to do with local EMS and first responder teams, and especially in light of the recent report that just came out from PHMSA and the Federal Office of Pipeline Safety in relation to a CO2-related incident, just to provide additional context if there's time for that as part of the agenda.
Preferably not.
Okay,
And if anybody has any questions, information they'd like to receive, I'd ask that you guys do that upstairs, and because we have to conduct the business meeting of the Board of Supervisors moving forward. I'm sure you guys probably have questions for them. And please stay and answer their questions as, good faith and working together on that. So
absolutely.
I guess if no one else from the board has anything, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 9 for secondary roads. A is approve final pay voucher for project Perrin 134 PCC replacement project on D54.
Colin Ryan for Secondary Roads. This project was on D54 going from Odo to L27. It's been completed by the contractor, and so Mark recommends that the board approves this final pay voucher.
I'll move approval.
I'll second. Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Right there. Item B is approved project agreement with Iowa DOT for project parent 175.
The DOT has plans prepared for a grading and paving project on Highway 20 near Lawton, and as part of resurfacing the project on Highway 20, they are going to do some paving where it intersects some of our county roads. They've done this at some locations in the past, and the public seems to appreciate it. So Mark would recommend that the board approve the project agreement with the DOT.
I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item C is approval of resolution to install, sorry about that, yield sign at intersection of Cass Avenue and 310th Street.
This was in response to a citizen concern. We conducted a traffic study at the intersection. Seasonally, the traffic approaching the intersection can be screened by some crop growth, creating a rather unsafe situation if traffic isn't really paying close attention. Traffic counts didn't seem to warrant a stop sign, but a yield sign will help direct traffic, giving right-of-way to a clear direction. The cost will be about $150 per sign. 2 signs are required, a yield sign and a yield ahead sign. And Mark would recommend that the board approve the resolution to install a yield sign.
I'll move that.
Second. Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Looks like we all get to sign that one, huh?
Thank you.
You bet, thank you. Moving on, 10B, approval of proposal for technical and advisory services for the administration of America Rescue Plan Act program and master services agreement with UHY Consulting, Inc.
Okay, the county attorney's office did review this. Also, he had about 8 changes. They accepted all the changes. We did ask for insurance, which I don't know if other, entities have asked for that. We did get insurance, where we're listed as a beneficiary of that. The scope of work is on page 7 of 8. It gives you about 9 different items that they'll be hitting. So pretty much covers everything. It's something I think we really need. And before we move forward on any other projects, and plus the projects we have done in the past here, which I have a list, a little book for them to review, that this will help us a lot and keep us on the right track. The total cost is per annum $71,000. There's a breakdown on page 8. That's per annum up to. So I asked him, will you spend that much? And he said, probably not. But this will be every year, basically through 2026 calendar year.
Do we need to go that long?
If we spend it all, have all of our expenditures approved, probably not.
Okay.
And we probably won't spend as much money anyway.
But where can that funding come from?
Comes from ARPA.
Okay.
That can be funded straight through ARPA,
100%,
straight costs.
yep, 100% of it, right?
Yep.
That helps.
Yeah. Even the one that we got with Baker Group, that can come through ARPA also, as part of administration of the ARPA funds.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, well, that was answered.
Okay.
When you say per annum, so you mean every single year we're paying that 71,000? What?
Up to 71,000 per annum, yes. But there probably won't, if we go the track we're going, we'll probably have it all spent within a year or two. Plus, that's only the maximum. It could probably be a lot less.
I guess I just wonder if we get to the end of a year, we say, okay, we paid you the 71,000, we got all the opinions, we're good. There's nothing that triggers, they're gonna be, it's like a service agreement every year, they're asking for their 71,000 for the next 3
Yeah,
years.
they'd have to come back every year for that part,
Okay,
to get it approved,
okay. And that's clear in here,
yes.
okay.
I want to thank you for your work on that, Dennis, especially getting that insurance added. I think that's something that's going to be very helpful to the board and to you and everyone that,
Joshua did review that also. He's at a conference this week, but I did talk to him this afternoon.
well, seeing that, I'll move this.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Young. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. Moving on to item 11 from Board Administration, informational item from Rocky, discussion on partnership with St. Luke's Unity Point to enhance EMT, paramedic, and ambulance coverage in Woodbury County.
About 3 weeks ago, I got an email from Mr. Hankey here and offering to look into enhancing our EMS and our emergency medical services out in the county. And somewhat reluctant, because I was wondering how much money they wanted right out of the gate, but it was very, very educational. Mr. Weldy and I both attended, and we'll have Mr. Weldy come up here and speak to it as well, but I think this can be a very strong partnership for the county. I mean, in the meeting with, his title is? CEO of St. Luke's Unity Point. So we didn't mess around. We went to Mr. Hankey and right to the top as far as that goes. It was a very informative, very instructional meeting on what they would like to do to help. And it's especially substantial since we have basically a rural county, but we have several towns, as Lieutenant Armstrong knows from the sheriff's office, several towns are not easy to get to with straight line travel between, say, Danbury, even Smithland. You got to go through another county to get, the most convenient way from there. But regardless, I asked Kevin and Lorenzo to show up, but Mr. Suter has obligations elsewhere, so I will ask Kevin to explain their side of it. Obviously, this is information only at this point, but it sounds like it could be a very strong partnership between the county and Unity Point moving forward.
So I'm Kevin Hankey, Unity Point. I'm the Regional Manager of Emergency Management EMS at Unity Point. I've been in the community 31 years as a paramedic, with 20 of it on the helicopter here in town. So I've been through the Siouxland paramedic days when it dissolved, providing the coverage into the county with paramedic assists, and then with emergency services with Bob being the director out there, is we noticed some needs where there's some coverage gaps, whether it's his team's busy with one paramedic and there's 2 or 3 calls going on in the county, or just coming over from Climbing Hill down the corridor of the interstate with Sergeant Bluff, Salix, and Sloan, just that pure distance to get to them, and with some staffing issues that, he's got an open paramedic spot that they're working on to fill, and that seems to be the nature with ambulance services across the United States. I approached Rocky with some ideals. Lorenzo's my CEO at Unity Point. He's been here for almost a year right now, and one of his things was to have our own ambulance transport system at Unity Point, which we do. We are fully authorized paramedic transport service at Unity Point, but something that I approached Rocky with, and we had a meeting last week with Lorenzo and Bob come, is just some ideas that we could help in the community, continue to provide that advanced care that a lot of the community has come to see with paramedic coverage with that. And one of the things that we brought out on the table with Rocky and Bob was, we're not asking, for anything. We'll provide all the stuff for our side as far as staff, vehicle. We would respond out of the hospital setting. What we're looking at doing with that is we'll cover the corridor of the interstate, which would be Sergeant Bluff, Salix, and Sloan as the primary response for paramedic, with Bob's team covering us if we're already tied up. Likewise, Bob would cover the rest of the county as primary, and we would provide secondary coverage for him if his team gets busy with a call and there's another need for a paramedic, that we would respond that way. We'll use our medical director, our own equipment, vehicle, and everything responding out of the hospital with the protocols, but we'll still provide that high-level paramedic. Our paramedics that work in the hospital, just with the recent job description change, all required to have their critical care certification within 2 years. So that's what our medics at the hospital have up there. I have mine, plus I have my flight paramedic certification that's still current from my days of flying on the helicopter.
So that's something that we brought to Rocky, come up, and after we talked about that, we kind of sparked some interest that we could be of a mutual aid type deal. You know, the counties have, city organizations have the 28E agreements, but would be something similar to a resource / mutual aid with the county to still be able to provide that coverage that we may have some voids in that corridor down the interstate where we can get to it a little bit easier than what the Bob coming out of Climbing Hill can with that. So that's something that we presented to Rocky and Bob last week up in Lorenzo's office, and everybody seemed very interested in it. So the next step was to come to present to you guys as an informational deal to see if we want to continue to move forward with that and have that collaboration between everybody.
One thing that he also mentioned was we'd probably need to tie something up with our comm center to get that, and I don't know all the details on how that works.
Right now, the 911 dispatch center dispatches all the county rigs, and also Bob. With that, we would want to be able to come in on that too, since that team out there is already sending those guys on the call. It only makes sense for us to be paged by those guys, because then there's some consistency. They know who's available, who's not available, and we can go responding with those guys so they can kind of keep track of everything. So that would be one thing. And we are part of the EMS Association here in Woodbury County as a transporting agency through Unity Point. So we've already, you know, we've been in part of that association too for the county.
So we probably need WCICC or somebody out there that make that part happen, or?
I don't know what all we'd need yet. I mean,
The
this
call
is,
center just needs their number
we need,
or whatever.
yeah, we'd need comm center involved. We need probably,
And I think ideally, we already have radio communications through the hospital that we use with Glenn. He set up some radios for us already with that. It would just be similar to what Bob uses out there on the paging, that all the EMS services, fire services, that they have the pagers, that they're paged through the 800 system. And we would ask to do probably exactly the same.
do you know, Kevin, if your radio system, is their radio system set up with ours, or could it sync with ours, with our new?
It already, all our radios are. So
Okay.
our radio that's in the emergency room is the 800,
Oh, that-
700.
yeah, it'd about have to be,
ISIX
wouldn't it?
platform. So we have all that, secure channels, the radio handheld that Glenn programmed for me. I have all the city fire, the county fire, all those already programmed in there.
We'd certainly need to bring Mr. Woodman in on, you know,
Sure.
on where to start, how to start, things like that. But at the initial meeting, it was pretty exciting that we might have obviously some backup, because we got some distance between some of those towns out there. And again, like you said, with the volunteers, not always available, or I don't want to take away from Bob's thunder here, but but no, like I said, it was pretty interesting, the concept going forward, and it's exciting to think that we can enhance our services without adding costs. So it's a nice feature that Unity Points wants to get involved with the. And Lorenzo seemed very high energy.
Yeah, he is very high energy, and one of his things when he come to Sioux City was to expand our own transport service. And we are with NICU. We currently do our own NICU transports out and back into the hospital with that. But one of the things that I have noticed over my career is some gaps that we've had with Siouxland being dissolved, and then with Bob's team, just their locations, that we have some voids in some areas that we may not be able to get to. And sometimes the squads, when they go on these calls, Bob may be tied up, or they're coming through the hills, climbing hills, so it takes them a little bit longer safely to come through those, that we could offer coming right straight out of the hospital down Pierce Street and hop on the interstate, that we could meet up just like we did in the days that we were, you know, Siouxland paramedics days. And we were looking at using an Explorer or a Durango, something like that, that just one of us could go with that, and then if we need to, we'll just lock it up on the side of the road, and then we'll come back and get it when we're done. So, but we'll still provide that same service that Bob provides. With that, a lot of the protocols and guidelines that Bob has, we've helped write them for us out of the hospital there with some of it. So they're all current trends. We use the flight service for the state-of-the-art stuff and what's evidence-based practices. So we'd still continue that high care. Yep. So we would continue that high evidence-based practice that we've helped Bob with developed some of their guidelines to the hospital already for his team out there at Climbing Hill.
You have a question there, too?
No.
No, I was,
Oh.
Jeremy.
I think Rocky may have answered it. First, I'll just commend you all for, coming up with the idea, and I think it sounds great. I was just gonna ask, is there anything right now that prohibits you from going to any of those communities? Do you have any sort of boundary lines right now?
No, because we're actually looking at, there's another gap that's with Plymouth County on that lower half, the Kingsley, that Bob tries to get some of them if he can, the Hinton, Merrill, that area that can't be serviced by Lamar's with their team. So, we have the option to, we don't have any boundaries, I want to say, around that.
And so it sounds then like next steps are looking to see if there's, from Mr. Whitman, a mutual aid agreement or what we need to do to formalize it?
Among other things, but I guess going forward, I'd like to know what the rest of the board, is there any excitement or interest in doing this going forward, especially for the community commitment and I think it speaks strongly of Unity Point personally.
I think it sounds like a good idea. Bob, could you maybe speak to Sergeant Bluff as a community? I know they have a pretty active program. Would they want
all
to?
the emergency services. Sergeant Bluff has a really, really good team, and they have an advantage, is they have some people that are in town, if you will, but not always do they have coverage either. We've had to go over there and man their ambulances for them. But anything that you can do to enhance anybody's service is going to be a welcome addition. I'll just give you a little example. Today we were called to Hornick to pick up a patient, and we had an awful time getting an ambulance. The first crew that they called out was not able to man their ambulance. The second crew they called out was not able to man their ambulance. Luckily, my partner is part of Sloan's crew. The deputy sheriffs are there to help us gain access to the house, which was locked and nobody had a key for it. So we're very hesitant to break down somebody's door unless it's a cardiac event or whatever, and then we'll do whatever we need to. But so one of the deputies was good enough to take, excuse me, my partner over to the service and get their ambulance and bring it over. And about that time, then the granddaughter showed up with the key, and we no more than got her loaded up, and another Woodbury County service got paged out. Well, my partner's driving the ambulance and I'm in the back. So we can't respond to that because there's nobody left. So in this particular case, Kevin's crew could have went out to Lawton or wherever they're needed. Sometimes if we're on the west side of the county, and somebody on the east side gets paged out, I can't be two places at one time, and there's a great distance between, say, Sloan and Cushing Correctionville or someplace like that, where it'd be nice if Kevin's team would be able to, to step in and pick that up for us. Something else that they're offering too is that a little oversight, and we could probably get some medical supplies from them. They offered that to us so that we could go through them and get some of our medical supplies, which would help us immensely, because, they buy it by the ton and we buy it by the
vial.
So, that would be, a saving for us also. So I think it's a very worthwhile venture. I think we just need to make sure that we get all the curves and the wrinkles out of it, and then if you guys want to, we'll proceed from there.
From talking to Bob, from talking to Kevin and other people that I know on the volunteer forces out there, there's no possible way we could cover every scenario, there's still gonna be gaps, but I think this would be a huge step in correcting some of them. So,
All right.
I guess would you like me to start tasking Mr. Woodman and looking into this, or how do you want to proceed?
I think that would make sense. You would know the best how to move forward.
Yeah, make the verbiage right. I'm not real big on verbiage.
And look into the mutual aid issues and all of that, but
And I can have that conversation with Glenn or Wendy out at the communication center on that, around that. So I've worked real close with them, throughout the years with the preparedness stuff and like that. So that's a pretty easy conversation that I'm comfortable with visiting with guys to see what the process is and what we need to potentially do.
get with me.
Okay.
Let's start. Let's start tomorrow.
You probably want to get with Glenn right away. He's only got like a month.
Yeah, he's gone in a couple of months. So, all right, that's what I needed. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? All right, thank you. We're moving on to report on committee meetings. Any from you guys? I had one, I just got to double check it. Simcoe exec. We had a conference board.
I didn't make it. I had
Who
a
else was there? Was that you? Yeah, it was you and me. So we had our conference board meeting. So part of that order from the state requires us to reassess all these residential properties. And we had two options as far as companies that we could contract with. One was, I think, from the Des Moines area and never really had a quote with a number, but they were given an estimate kind of early on of something like $500,000. And then the other one was our former assessor here who lived in Sioux City, Mel Obink, and his company, and it was about $144,000. So we did that contract with him to move forward with the reassessment of those properties. Funding source, you'd say probably was reserves from,
He's got about 600, so he can.
so we had some reserves in the, what would you call that? We call it conference board, right? Or,
Yeah, city assessor.
yeah, city assessor's budget, so. And then we basically let it so Mayor Scott could execute the agreement as the chair of the conference board. So,
Be about $144,000 for the year and take about a year by the time all those get reassessed. And so it's a project, it's a thing.
yeah, and what was the other thing that, I'm trying to remember, discussion from that. Oh, we also had some extra funds from not having a position filled there yet, so that's why the reserves were so high. I guess that was the other thing I was going to say.
I would say two other things. One is that he's going to need to have access, obviously, to the staff and almost be as if he is the assessor. That's important. And then the other thing that I think is pertinent is Craig Paulson from the Department of Revenue
Yes.
signed off that this would be acceptable, because I think what we don't want to do is contract with Mel's company and then find out you need to do it over again and keep trying. So this is a way forward.
And then on Simcoe, through the search board, update on that building, they have footings in the ground already and moving along with that project. And I think they're expecting almost 4 months completion time,
They
so,
got walls up. They're going on some roofing.
yeah,
You got a lot of paving done already.
yeah. Well, that might be some of the DOT building that you're seeing too, because that's kind of right next to it there. But they're moving along pretty quick, but it's a lot smaller footprint than the building we're building here. All right, any citizen concerns, round two? Yes.
Deb Main, 1026 Charles Avenue. I know that Navigator gave a broad overview of their project, but I have some really grave safety issues with the pipeline, not just setting aside the private company getting payment with our tax dollars, but I think for our EMS and our law enforcement people, it's going to be a burden, not just duty-wise, but cost-wise. There's going to be clerical obligations for the county. I don't know about road damage and that sort of stuff. I think they need to really get into more detail about the nitty-gritty about what's going to happen when, if this comes to pass, what it's going to mean for the actual production of the pipeline. I don't know how many people they're going to hire here. I don't know if they're going to live here, but that could be a problem for the law enforcement if they're from out of town. Also, power requirements and that sort of thing. I think we really need to dig into this and find out exactly what it's going to mean for the people that live here, should that project come to fruition.
Anybody else with any concerns not already on the agenda?
Gail Palmquist, 1848 130th Street at Lawtonville. I have a concern that actually arose after I was at the meeting last week. I found out that some of the emails, most of the emails evidently that we're sending to the Board of Supervisors from the landowners group against the CO2 pipeline are being filtered out of your system. And Mr. Raddick told me you have a very good filter system. And I believe it now because we've been sending a lot of things. And apparently you're not getting them. So some people have been getting them, I think, but others evidently have not. So I'd like to have you loosen that up a little bit so we can contact our supervisors with our concerns. So I don't think it's quite right that you have a filter that throws us out. So
Yeah, I know the department with WCICC, which does the filtering for both Sioux City and Woodbury County, is constantly creating new protocols, I guess, as far as for safety and training, as far as what emails with attachments come through and whatnot, because the cybersecurity risk, and I just got a new quote for cybersecurity insurance liability.
yes, I am.
I got you.
So,
Have you gotten some things from us?
yeah, so I don't know. Some get them and some don't get them. I don't know if.
Well, the administrator of our group has been sending things too. And have you been getting those from the landowners group?
It's hard to know without knowing the email address. I know that I've gotten your emails, but sometimes I think if they come from what appears to be an advocacy group or it looks like it's auto-generated, we may not. It may flag versus a private email, if that makes sense.
Carl?
Yes.
Carl Palmquist?
Yes.
I got one on April 28th.
Okay. I sent one just a couple weeks ago about the ordinances.
What's your email address?
eastviewfarm@gmail.com.
What's the first part of that?
Eastview.
Eastview Farm.
No, the only one from Eastview is from Carl Palmquist.
Additionally, we all have our own quarantine portals where we can whitelist and allow messages through. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's just one of the steps in the process. And so we do have to go and click through and allow it, and then we do get it. So,
Okay, so if individuals send you something, they won't necessarily get through. And evidently our administrator from the landowners group, those are not coming through either. Does anybody gotten anything from her?
What's the email address from your administrator?
Oh, gee, I don't know. Her name is Jess Major, Mazour.
I've gotten
But there's some important stuff coming up about ordinances.
Yeah.
And we've been sending you, there was a 15-page paper on things counties could do.
Yeah, I've gotten them from Jessica Mazur.
Okay, all right. Can we make sure that all of you get those?
Yeah, I think there's a way I could probably get a hold of IT and have them allow those through for me.
Okay. I know I did get through to Karen and, what's your partner's name?
Heather.
Heather. But, yeah, and she sent you some things this week that I had sent her, so she helped me out there. Thank you.
All right.
Questions?
No.
Okay, I wish, yeah, we can get that straightened out, so otherwise it's a waste of our time and you guys aren't getting the information that you need.
All right. Thank you, Gail. Anybody else to be heard? Anything? Come right on up, speak your name and address.
Jim Collier, 1650 Old Highway 141. I just want to thank all of you guys for sending your formal letter to the Iowa Utility Board on your objection. And that's all I need to say, because where I live is impacted by both of these pipelines. And I was glad you guys stood behind us as farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else to be heard not on the agenda? All right, board concerns? Do you have one? Okay. Either of you guys? I've gotten a few phone calls from Ragbri, and I know, Don, you've been contacted on our zoning and questions on that. And the initial calls were all about setting up little alcohol huts along the path and how they could get the zoning for that. And there's just not time for, you'd have to get a liquor license. And so then all of a sudden at the last minute here, last couple phone calls I got were about selling tire tubes and water. But I still haven't gotten any information on locations. They just sent me a map of the route, but if they're planning to put it like just a mile outside of Mobile, then just put it inside Mobile and work with somebody in Mobile is what I would think.
And Armstrong and I had conversations too, and for some concerns on that side, it just seems like, wish you guys had started a couple months earlier.
Well, that's kind of what I had said, and they had said, well, don't you want to work with Ragbri as a big thing, for tourism and everything, but I mean, there's kind of a notification process for being on the zoning commission and then the hearing process, and I mean, most counties, cities all have the same laws when it comes to that, so I didn't have any intention on bending any of those rules or breaking them, so I just wanted to see if anyone else had got in contact or questions on it.
I think for the timeline that, I'd hate to see our zoning guy go through and jump through hurdles and hoops that he's got other things to do with such late notice, so, sorry.
Yeah. All right. No other concerns? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.